think AI is going to change the content game just by making it faster and cheaper for you to make what you made before, you're going to fail.
Welcome to another episode of SmartCraft. I'm Lawrence, Managing Director of Brightly Day, and today we're talking to Jason on the subject of AI. It is going to be epic. So obviously we're here to talk about AI. It is prevalent, it is in the mindset of everyone. It's in every news story and outlet going on just how fast it's gained consumer attention and public awareness. I mean, AI has been around for 20 years, if not longer, but it's now hit the market in a big way. Having said that it's everywhere, do you think it's overhyped at the moment?
So last week, my son's 12, and he had to do an assignment for school where he had to come up with a contentious topic. And he comes to me and he's showing me his homework assignment. He's like, chose artificial intelligence as his contentious topic. So that to me was a pretty strong indicator that the hype level is quite high.
Yeah,
it's reaching
it's schools.
12-year-olds. But I actually think that's the correct amount of hype. I think it is. It's easy to just hear this stuff over and over and start to like, okay, well, this is it's overhyped. It's more attention than maybe it's deserving at the moment. But I think it's really hard to overestimate how much of a game change this is, or this represents. And you mentioned it earlier, right? The speed at which it is improving. Yeah. is really, on one hand, a little frightening, but on the other hand, like really exciting. And if you're somebody who likes to think about possibilities the way that I do, this is a really cool time to be alive and involved in this kind of stuff. So I would say that the level of the hype is probably correct. What I think is maybe missing is really depth of understanding.
We've discussed in a previous episode that marketing is being asked to do more with less. There's less budget, there's less time, there's less headcount in a lot of opinions, but there's more to do because there's more channels, more audiences, more content that needs to get out there. How do you think AI is going to impact the need for marketing to do more with less?
So I'm gonna break up the answer to this into two pieces, right? So like I think the first piece and the natural place where people go first is do same with less.
Nice.
And AI, and that's how they think of AI most immediately. The first context for it is, I want to make the same stuff. I want to do all this stuff, but I want to do it faster and cheaper. And there's certainly a huge amount of opportunity for that. And if you're talking to marketers today who aren't at least taking some advantage of that, that is those marketers are going to be in for a very nasty surprise.
Yeah.
But I think there's a part of the conversation, the second part of the conversation, that is not very top of mind, I guess, in the conversation, or is not a topic that's sort of rising to the top of this conversation very often, which is the best part for me, which is how do you do more with same? So it's not just about doing the same things that you were doing before, or even more of the same things. Is actually going to be about doing different things. And especially if you sort of play this out, right? So like AI is going to make it is already making it much easier for people to create all kinds of content. Cool. Here's a flood of content into the market. Now, what's going to be different about your content that's actually going to make it stand out and make somebody want to see that piece versus the 1,000 million other pieces of content that are out there about the same thing. And that's where I think this gets exciting, right? Is like, what new formats, what new ways of engaging and communicating with humans does AI enable that weren't possible before? It's not just about like, oh, how can I get it to write a social post for me or a white paper or create a video? It's like, what is a case study? What if a case study could talk to me? What if I could read a case study and then ask it questions and then have it set up a meeting for me with a seller? Like, those are the kinds of things that are really interesting to me, and where I feel like people, we'll get there eventually with the conversation, but I think the initial inclination is to think like, I want to make my same stuff faster. I think when we can start pivoting to what different stuff can I make that's gonna stand out in this sea of same, that's where it gets real interesting.
AI, as it begins to learn you and what you like and what you look for and start to redact, I don't see 2,000 results, of which I will only look at the first 6 links anyway. But when you don't see any of that and you just see your AI returning information to you and filtering and sifting on your behalf, do you think actually we're going to end up with a very, very small world of a vast amount of information that we never see and understand?
It's possible. So that's certainly a danger. Right, and like it's a flavor of the social algorithm, right? The bubble, right? Of like, okay, if I tell this particular robot through my actions and what I interact with that this is my bubble, then it's only going to feed me my bubble, and it's going to really reduce my ability to understand and empathize with the existence of any other bubbles. That's a huge problem.
Marketing teams are being stretched and needing to deliver an evidence, and the requirement for content. I mean, that when you look at the death of TV, slow but steady, and advertising in the digital space becoming so prevalent, and then you look at content feeding that constant machine. There was a stat that there was more content created in 2010 than the entirety of humanity. Now, the last time I remember seeing that stat, I'm sure now it's just every 10 minutes more content is created. AI is going to accelerate that for sure, because that marketing team that traditionally, the white paper I'm writing or the lead magnet or the engaging piece of content, that might have taken me 3 weeks, a month to do. If I can now close that into one day, well, it's not what I'm going to do. I've done my one a month. Now I don't have to worry because it only took me a day. They'll go, right, well, then do 3 or do 4, do 1 a week, do 1 a day. And that's just going to accelerate massively the dearth of content that's out there.
I think in the short term, right, like the idea of, the ideas of versioning and personalization, right, are really interesting places where AI is. So, if you think of you have a piece of content, and that's historically been one to many, one piece. In today's world, now maybe that gets, and AI helps you do this much more easily, right? As you take this version and you're like, okay, now I'm going to create a version for this subsegment of an audience, for this subsegment, for this subsegment. It's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little nuanced for each of them. It's going to speak a little bit more directly to these smaller groups of people.
Yes.
And then you take it down to the level of, okay, I'm going to nuance this in a way that to make it specific to you, Lawrence. Technically, I guess those are, whatever, in this example, maybe 5 different pieces of content from something that used to be 1, or down to millions of pieces of content for something that used to be 1.
So your advice in short term for marketing is you've got to immerse yourself. Even if you're dipping a toe in the water, it's not something that can be ignored. It is here. It will probably consume you if you try and understand all of it because it moves so fast. But in the short term, finding ways of doing the same, but better, but faster. Do the same with less. That is, GPT is an obvious one, Canva, these little tools that just help you expedite everything from meeting notes to summary of conversations or proposal, like proposal writing, things like that. Those are the bits to start playing with right now, because they will create time. That time you can then start thinking about, how do we do more, properly more with less? How do we actually build into our experience, our brand experience, AI that takes it up a gear, that actually moves us on? And that isn't something that, the speed it's moving, I was going to say, isn't something that will be next year. It probably will be next year. That actually these brands are using these things to deliver a personalized experience that is framed around the user and what they want and what they need.
Yeah. I think that's, you stated it exactly right, which is like, the first step is clearly figure out where you can take some time back. But that is going to be a short-term thing, right? Because the things that you are making today are not going to be the things that work tomorrow, as soon as everybody else figures out that, okay, I can make those same things way faster. I can make a lot more of them. So here's the flood.
Yeah. I was trying to explain this to, obviously, when my kid was like, I've created a cat. I was like, you do know that the AI doesn't know what a cat is. Right. It has no concept of cat. It can amazingly draw a very accurate picture of one, give it a fluffy hat and put it in a blanket, but it doesn't know what it is. It doesn't know the difference between a dog and a cat. And I think people are surprised when they see how fast AI is moving, how intelligent it seems to be. Actually, there is a lack of understanding that it is ignorant. It might be a prodigal child, but it is an infant that has no concept of cat or dog or people. In that regard, when we're creating content with it, do you fear or do you think there's the risk that we'll start to lose the human in it because it doesn't understand humans?
So the short answer is yes, because exactly what you described, right? It's inherently derivative, where it sort of learns from the things that have come before. So it is not as good at figuring out, well, what hasn't been done before. But I think that actually could end up being a good thing, because particularly in the world of B2B advertising, I think we as an industry have not been great about recognizing humanity in the way that we market to people, right? And really being focused on the fact that there's a business objective to it, but at the end of the day, it is a human making decisions, and humans are not completely rational beings, right? So there is an element of emotion and feel and relationship that matters in any kind of marketing. And so kind of coming back to the question of like, does AI represent extraction of that concept? I think that, and this is kind of tied into what we talked about earlier, where maybe in the very short term the answer is yes, but I think people are very quickly going to get to the point where they're realizing like, this is all same. I've seen this before, and and if I can't connect with it in a way that's emotional, that makes me feel something, then it's not going to work. And so where I hope this will lead is to, again, AI is a really good tool for people who are creative and who are able to make that connection or create a concept of something that will create a connection with another human that's not purely rational. Then AI can help them realize that vision a lot faster. But I don't think, like, again, if we kind of default to that vision of like, well, AI is just going to do its thing and it's going to create all the stuff, then that stuff is very quickly going to stop working.
We've obviously seen for quite a while large corporates and companies increasing their capabilities of doing agency work. Do you think that AI hitting the market as it has will accelerate that?
So I think the short answer is no, I don't think so. I think as a marketer, right, when you're trying to make the decision of do I bring work in-house or do I use an agency for it, I think probably one of the key questions that you ask yourself in that is like, what value will it bring if an agency does this stuff versus if I do this stuff? Mm-hmm. So then to me, the key sort of differentiator becomes how much real creativity and how much of a different approach does this require to make it really good, mm-hmm. right? So if you think about like the kinds of work that have been in-house historically, it's mostly been the kind of production, right? It's like take a thing and turn that into a bunch of social posts or turn it into different variations on a theme. Mm-hmm. That stuff you might still want to bring in-house, you might still want to use an agency. I think either way, AI is going to make that stuff way easier, so it should be cheaper for you to do it through an agency or cheaper for you to do it in-house. It's kind of 6 1/2 dozen. Where I think agencies will hopefully continue to thrive is in the places where that different approach, that different way of thinking can yield a more effective product.
So obviously agencies have done a great job in surviving and thriving, like you said, when the internet arrived and print was dead. Every print agency, you either panicked and did something about it or you died. But we understood and we evolved and we grew capabilities and services. I suppose what's interesting, and we've got 60 years of history, and you do go, creativity is at the heart of all of it. And it leans into what we were saying earlier, where our view, the crazy, chaotic world of agencies, our view is quite wide. You are at the coalface of a lot of it. You're seeing what's going on. You're learning from different clients, different experiences, different industries and sectors and audiences. And you're bringing the whole sum of that into that one brief where you go, okay, this is what you've asked for, but I can pull on all these different threads to create and be creative and set apart. And I suppose what you're saying is agencies might suffer, I suppose we'll all feel a slight edge of, well, AI, the client can do this. Actually, if we're pricing right, we can do it as well, just as fast. So it should be cheaper for either party. Right. So where's the value? But the bit AI isn't going to hit yet is the creativity. At the heart of it, coming up with that new thought, that new idea, that new way of talking to someone, or a new technology to land, a new AI-driven technology, as a different way of communicating with people. That creative edge still sits a lot of the time in the heart of agencies.
Yeah, and you could argue, right, that this is a time where agencies will become more valuable because of the newness of AI, right? And the fact that, okay, most clients are not going to have that breadth of the view of how, different clients and different companies are using and changing and having success or not having success. Yeah. The creativity, I think, applies to more than I don't think of it as just a narrow view of can somebody come up with a great concept for an ad. It's creativity of approach. It's like, can you think about your process differently? Is there a new format? Is there a different way of delivering a message that didn't exist before?
Yeah.
And that's where, if I was working in an agency or owned an agency, those are the places where I'd be leaning in and being like, this is actually a super exciting time, because nobody wanted to do that work of like the versioning of a white paper, like anyway. Yeah. Nobody wants to do that. Now let's not do that. Let's let the robots do it, and let's focus on what the version 2.0 or 3.0 is of that thing. And let's try to build that.
And then in terms of for agencies. It'd be interesting to get your perspective on, as a marketer, you've been in large corporates, what do you think agencies need to change over the next 12 months to actually still add value into the world of marketing?
So I think the first thing would be really diving in and adopting those tools, right? Getting faster and more efficient where you can. I think that's going to be a sort of table stakes expectation. So that's, step one, like we talked about before, right? It's like, how can I do same, but for less?
Yeah.
But like we talked about before, right? Like, I think the place where the real value is going to get created in this change is in really then pivoting to, okay, what's different in the future, and how do I prepare myself, prepare my clients for that change? How do I have a point of view on what those changes are going to be? How do I start testing and experimenting with things that might be more in line with those changes? It is. I think, like I said, I think it's an exciting time to be in that space. So use the savings from getting faster on today's stuff to think about what tomorrow's stuff looks like.
I suppose just wrapping up, we've talked about AI and its current guise. We know it's changing every day. AGI. At what point, and it's just out of pure interest, at what point do we get scared? Like you said, with your son picking that contentious point of, it's great, people are going to lose jobs. I saw an interview with the godfather of AI, and he was saying there should be we should start planning now a universal payment, because when AGI hits, when it actually does understand the difference between dog and cat, there's a lot of people that won't be working. And his point of view was that if we were a well-structured socio-economy, you would go, well, 10,000 people, 1 million people, 1 billion people don't have jobs. It's not their fault, technology's moved on, so they need to be paid. They can't live in poverty. So people are still making money, let's just spread that money wide. His view was that actually what will happen is the wealthy will get incredibly wealthy. The large companies that leverage AI faster than everyone else will hoover up. They'll fire 90% of the workforce, but they'll still make all the money and they'll keep the money. And it was a real worry for him that actually we are running headlong into a rather ugly dystopian view of poverty-stricken where wealth is wealth.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very real consideration, right? And from my personal perspective, like, I would support the AI Safety Council, that sort of thing. And I think over-investing in those kinds of things for governments, probably does have to be governments, which, is, for better or for worse, have not been historically great at regulating technologies like this. But, if they could hire somebody like that, the guy who, is his name Mustafa by any chance?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Yeah, the DeepMind guy.
Yeah.
Hire somebody like that to lead it.
Mm-hmm.
And really be careful about understanding where this could go and where it is going, and raising a red flag when it's like, hey, we're getting awful close here to something dangerous. Like, we should think through what happens at this phase. Thankfully, we're not quite there yet, but it's going to happen quickly, right? The way that the pace is astonishing. And so having people that know what they're doing and can really project that out into, like, well, what are the real ramifications of this, because they're meaningful in the broadest sense. I think is really important. Now, let's say that I had that view that that this ultimately ends up in a bad place. Would I recommend that people then disengage from AI in the short term, or in the medium or even long term because of that belief? Like, I think that you're going to run some real personal risk of getting left behind.
You'll be obsolete.
If you don't at least understand it in a more meaningful way.
Jason, it's been a fantastic interview. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
I think we could talk all day about this, but
let's.
We'll carry on. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.